reconvene this public hearing. And apologize, it took a little longer than we thought. Not the commissioner's fault.
It was the attorneys.
So,
I'm not charging by the hour, I'm retired.
So we'll turn this back over to Joel and to Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joel Stevens, County Council, for the record again. So, had some conversations with Mr. Keene, and I think that, I think we have a possibility of a stipulated findings resolution that could resolve a lot of the hypothetical conundrums that we've been discussing
Okay.
here. What I would recommend at this point is, we'll let Mr. Keene wrap up his presentation. I think he's basically at the end. We need to go ahead and do public comments. So I would recommend we go ahead and do those, and then Mr. Keene's gonna have an opportunity to come back up and do his final comments. And at that point, I think we can have a more substantive and detailed discussion, if you want, about what a set over to develop potential stipulated findings could look like. And then the board can go into deliberations.
Okay.
That'd be my recommended path
So,
forward.
since Mr. Keene will be back at the table again, so if we have any further questions, we can hold them till then. Are we good? Okay. So at this point, we are going to.
Yeah, so we will go ahead and rest our initial case here, knowing that we're gonna have rebuttal later, so.
Okay, perfect. So the petitioner's presentation is now closed. We are going to ask for public comments. Isabel, we don't have anyone signed up for public comments.
We
is
do
that
not.
correct?
No.
But since this is taking a lot of twists and turns, I think I'll just ask anyone online, if you want to make a public comment, now is your chance. Although I'm gonna hold you to like 2 minutes if you do want to make a public comment at this point. Hearing none. Okay. So, so on my agenda, after public comments, which we had none, we have final comments from the petitioner. Is that where we're gonna go?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. King.
Continuing the need to respond to twists and turns as they
Wait.
arise.
So, should I close
Oh, public comment.
public comment, or, I don't close the record now, because we're still hearing from the petitioner, correct?
Correct, but you could make an indication that nobody indicated wanting to make public comments, and that the public comment period is closed.
Okay, so I already stipulated that we had no public comments, so the public comment period for this public hearing is now closed. And we'll go back to Mr. King.
Yes, as Joel indicated, we think we may have the possibility of a way to resolve a lot of the hypotheticals that are keeping us from like fully committing, because, you know, I don't know why you would appeal and without knowing more, and you don't want to proceed with a decision without knowing more, and we can answer a lot of those questions by agreeing to the answers in a set of stipulated findings or agreements, we think. And we explored those possibilities a little bit to make sure it was a reasonable, practical thing to do, and I wholeheartedly believe that we both got the incentive and the incentive and the optimism that we can do it. That's worth a recess for us to take a stab at it and present you with something.
Perfect. Okay. So, who's going to convince the commissioners that this is in our best interest?
I could provide a little additional information.
Okay, who wants to go first? Okay, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there's, as Mr. King indicated, there's still a lot of details to work out, and you know, we would ask for sufficient time to do that, and I think the next hearing, if the board were so inclined in deliberations to just set this over, you know, the next hearing could be set out far enough to where we would have sufficient time to do that. But one of the potential benefits of the many potential benefits of stipulated findings is that if we can come to an agreement, they could be structured in a way that give petitioner what they feel like is sufficient direction for how to move forward in a positive way.
So you're talking findings here?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, yeah, they would be stipulated findings,
Okay.
but basically a stipulated denial with findings. So, one of the benefits of that, because they would be stipulated, is that everyone would be agreed on their appropriateness, so there would be no, option of appealing those findings. They would adequately address petitioners' concerns about having sufficient direction to move forward. But there could also be stipulations to defer certain decisions on certain issues, like, for example, the Capes, so that the board is not boxed in with the next petition as far as what their decision on that needs to be. So, we also discussed whether it would be fruitful to continue with the process regarding the Capes now, but do a stipulated findings later. And I think we all kind of felt like that was not the most productive way to proceed, if there's a real chance that we could reach stipulated findings here. Because we can stipulate to deferring that issue. Mr. Keene's already indicated, what his plans are for that next time, but, that can also be a stipulation in the agreement. But I think it gives us an opportunity to agree on some findings, which I think, back to that desire for a clean process, I think this is definitely an opportunity for that. That again would provide sufficient direction for the future for petitioners, but would also alleviate any concerns about, challenges to the process that could further delay this. And avoid the potential conundrum of having an approved petition that even the petitioners don't feel like works adequately. So, did I ag?
Yeah, I think basically, and with, I guess, if I might, with the added proviso that if we can't end up coming to an agreement on things, we'll be right back where we are now, with no harm done.
Sure.
And so those stipulated agreements, that would include not only the petitioner filing an appeal, but any of the signatories to the, what is that?
Sign to the petition.
Petition. Yeah, any signatures to the petition, they also would not have the right to appeal, is that correct?
Well, some of the stuff we're still gonna have to work out,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Jerry and I are gonna have a lot more
Okay.
conversations. I mean, I think, these would be stipulated findings from the petitioner, so the representative
Okay.
body for the petitioners would be stipulating to these findings. Now, so I think it can be structured in a way where that is certainly the intent. I mean, there's no, as we've talked about with other things, I mean, anyone can file anything, but I think it can be structured in a way to where as the representative for the petitioner as a class, they are stipulating. And it would, yeah.
And then that's the legal issue, and practically, the only people that would probably appeal it would be the people that object to a denial. And I think I can speak confidently about our ability to predict that nobody that supports the petition is going to file an appeal of it if we can come to agreement on these findings. There has not been any significant dissent in our community about going forward, as opposed to now. They're following our lead of the committee, and we are explaining everything as we go along to them. And we can confidently predict if we can come to an agreement on stipulated findings, there would not be an appeal from our side.
All right. Sarah, did you have comments you wanted to make here?
No, thank you, Chair Yamamoto, I'm good.
Been pretty silent.
Well
here.
said, well said, I have nothing to add, thank you. I'll
Okay.
just help with the findings.
So, this, questions? Comments?
I assume this is a standard legal practice. It feels a little like setting the end, so it feels a little funky to me. So I guess I'm looking at county council. It feels a little, yeah. It feels like we're tasked with making this decision, and
You're a court.
yeah, I'm not used to being a court. Tell me more about
I want some robes.
What a wig, no, that's different.
Sorry.
Stipulated findings are very common,
Okay.
because that's basically how to memorialize two opposing parties coming to an agreement to resolve a case. So stipulated findings are very common. You know, this, applying them in where we're at in this current proceeding is unusual, I would say.
We're breaking new ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, so, you know, in that sense, I mean, it's unusual to apply stipulated findings in a situation like this. But, you know, the stipulation is going to cover everything, including, you know, why the board is denying, and while at the same time, again, not boxing the board in for future decision-making, because we're all under the understanding that there's gonna be a new petition coming with additional information and things like that. So, you know, I think we can structure it in a way that accomplishes all those things. You know, is it unusual in this particular type of proceeding? Yes, I'm not aware of it ever being. But we don't have a lot of examples, so in that sense, it's unusual, but stipulated findings themselves as a way to resolve a matter are not unusual. If that answers your question.
It does, thank you. It sounds like it is a best of all possible worlds. We have found ourselves in a case where we don't think we can withdraw. We feel like we have to go forward, but really what we desire is a collaborative solution to get to where Oceansiders United, you know, wants to go, or the community of Oceanside, and that the commissioners feel that they have done their due diligence and our jobs. So this allows for that.
Yes, please.
So does stipulated findings, does this proposal address your timing concerns? How does it address your concerns about timing?
We're going to work on that.
Okay.
Like I said, if we can't come up with something we think is viable, we'll just come back to you and let you know. We need more time than we had in the hallway.
Gotcha.
We acknowledge that was an issue we need to address, and we think we have some ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. We discussed that issue, and I think it'll just be a matter of hammering out language that we can both agree on.
Okay.
So since we're still in this conversation stage here, so, how would you desire this board to move forward? I mean, I think we were kind of moving on potential of changing boundaries. I'm not sure that you still want us to go there.
So what I would recommend at this point, you know, after talking with Ms. Absher and Mr. Keene, is that for today in deliberations, the board just decide to set this over without making any further decisions at this point. Because if we're able to reach stipulated findings, those could include stipulations regarding deferring that issue until the next petition. And, you know, speaking with Ms. Absher, that felt like the most efficient way to address this, rather than kind of just going through an exercise with the case now and then, you know, ending up in the same place. But if we're not able to reach stipulated findings that are satisfactory to the board and satisfactory to the petitioner, then, you know, all we've done is delay this process a little bit, but we're in the same place. And at that point, the board, if they choose, could decide we need to adjust the boundaries and just proceed with this process. So there's really, you know, at this point, the board's not committing to any kind of stipulated findings. It's purely just a set over to allow us to explore that opportunity.
Are there any timelines as to how long it may take to come up with stipulated findings?
If I may,
Sure.
while we're engaged in this process, petitioners are willing to waive the 150 days if it applies. So in terms of that being
Yeah.
conditionally waived, or what's my word?
Conditionally.
That's not the right word. But anyway, from our standpoint, if that's the driving factor, we're willing to waive it while we're engaged in this process.
And I think that's appropriate, and that, you know, that would just take that issue off the table, so basically we're not rushing through trying to develop these findings. And then when the board comes back, either the findings are acceptable or they're not. If they're not, we just proceed with the process, and, you know, and we're not bumping up against that if it applies, which I think there's a strong argument it doesn't, but, you know, the 150-day issue. But hopefully, if we have been able to develop findings that are acceptable to the board and petitioners, then we can resolve the matter at that time.
I have one question that might be silly.
Apple.
It won't be the first. So I heard from a community member who was upset about this whole process and basically upset that we're filing a lawsuit against the county. So I didn't assume that it was true, but I'm just double checking with you that there are no lawsuits being filed against us that you know of on this issue.
I'm absolutely unaware of anything. I think it was coming from supporters, I would know.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
And if it's happening, I'm probably going to discourage it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I would just say I appreciate the creativity and, in using the legal system to help us find a solution.
And I do, I appreciate the collaborative nature.
To the tango here, three, both sides are, I appreciate the chance to work with Joel on this. I'm thoroughly confident we're going to come up with something.
Okay, so at this point, Jerry, unless you have anything else, we will close your final comments for this public hearing.
I guess I would just note that there were additional exhibits put into the record. And Sarah, I'm not sure those were acknowledged in your presentation but they are there already, and so I think if you need to read one, to make sure that that's acknowledged, which are two post-hearing submissions and all those emails that came in. We understand those have been made part of this, right?
That is correct.
They're all right.
Yes.
Thank you for-
Including
Okay.
the one recently received
One.
the other day.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, anything else?
No.
Okay, so we will close final comments from the petitioner, final comments from staff.
Thank you, Chair Yamamoto. At this time, I have none.
What? So there is no, at this point, I don't think there's any need for the Board of Commissioners to deliberate, or should we deliberate on the potential for stipulated findings as presented by councils?
You wouldn't deliberate on potential stipulated findings, you would just deliberate on whether or not to set this over.
Okay.
Because, yeah, at this point, we're not making any commitment to stipulated findings, it's just
Okay.
basically something we're going to explore. And as far as, can I have just a moment?
Sure.
Joel, when do we close the public hearing?
That's what I'm.
Okay.
Good question, apparently you're not the only one.
Thank you, Isabel, for keeping us on track here. Oh, my stomach is growling, you hear it? Again, I just want to thank you for coming in today with an open mind and, allowing us to work with you. That's great. We appreciate it.
Back at you. No, I appreciate this too. I think this is the best possible way to this forward.
It's something that's not commonly allowed inside statute and policy and all of those things, to just have a very real conversation to really get to where we would all like to be, which is moving forward in a positive way. And, yeah.
And that's what I meant by everything depends on good faith, and everybody should be good faith. It's trying to move forward on something transparent. I think this is going to work out.
Perfect. When you need mental recess.
Just gonna enjoy a moment of zen. That's what it always says on my YouTube channel, you know.
Maybe I should
Just
have-
say, take this moment of zen when there is no activity, no commercial, you're just.
No
gives you a-
content.
Yeah, no content, so we'll just all take a moment of zen.
Otherwise I make these candy.
Oh, Jane just reminded us that we are, during our moment of zen, we are live streaming.
We are live.
Well, that's what I figured, it was content, right?
It's live zen.
Zen.
Anybody want to do a tap dance right now?
Go ahead.
Back to the singing. There's the singing.
We're gonna sing happy
Oh,
birthday.
it is Joe's birthday, that's right, we should be singing.
I forgot my phone, I can't video it. Let's get this down.
We all want to break it.
We do,
Yeah.
we do, I know we do. So, who wants to sing happy birthday to Joel?
I thought we were past that.
This
have
is-
a little quiet
and thi-
time
and this
on
is being-
camera.
And this is being live streamed at this point. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think at this point, since, we've had these discussions, we've been through public comment, whenever the chair feels appropriate, you could go ahead and close the record, which would include closing the record to public comment, new evidence. The record would be closed. You can then go into deliberations. If you choose to set this over, you could do that. And in speaking with Mr. Absher, I think we would just schedule that administratively, so rather than trying to pick a specific date now, it'll be noticed and scheduled after.
Gives us time,
Yes. Agreed.
then that way we can take the time we need to work through.
And our schedule is such that it's gonna be very difficult to find times for everyone to be
Yeah.
present.
And time
I would
work together, so.
I would anticipate at least 4 weeks out. It's going to take us a little bit of time between budget hearings coming up and everything else. We are gonna need a little bit of breathing room if that's okay. But I would anticipate something, or at least the notice of the next hearing within a month's time.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, and
Yes.
just in further clarification of that, and Ms. Absher might have something to add, but what me and Mr. Keene were talking about is, at this point, we closed the record, but what we would probably anticipate is opening it again at the next hearing, especially if we have what we think are potentially acceptable findings. So, Ms. Absher, are you
Yeah.
comfortable with that? Because then, the potential findings could be submitted for consideration, which would be new material, so we would need to open the record for that, as well as allow, petitioner an opportunity to comment on those, and the public an opportunity to comment on them. So I think if you close the record today until the next hearing, I would just note, we probably anticipate opening it up again.
We can post the draft findings 7 days prior to the hearing on the website. I can do the notice again because I'll have to post the hearing anyway. So we can do it at that time. And that way the public has an opportunity to read those and review them prior to the hearing.
See, Jane, what did I tell you about this being a long meeting? Told you you'd be there.
Sorry, I lied. I said an hour.
That's what Mr. Scarlett's saying too. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and we can talk about that. But yeah, I see.
I apologize.
No, it's much better.
Some things I wasn't involved in.
These are unusual circumstances there.
I'm fine.
Okay, all right, and Ms. Absher, are you okay with that?
I'm perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
Okay, so without objection from the other two commissioners, we are going to close the record with the potential and probable reopening of the record when we were to reconvene. Sufficient?
Sufficient.
Okay, so the record is currently closed. Let's go into deliberations with the Board of Commissioners. So we've heard what is being proposed. Comments?
I move that we set over the hearing.
And I would say.
No comments, okay, just a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So, at this point, there is no other action required of the Board of Commissioners, correct? So, at this point, close the public hearing?
Correct, and a future date will be established and then noticed.
What Joel just said. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
We didn't finish the